The Big Ten is poised for more expansion. But how? Nationwide into big markets or chasing the elite brands of college football? That's the $1 million question in college football's power grab at the moment. Look, the Big Ten doesn't need to expand right now. I said that before we got started here. They don't need to expand. With 18 teams, they stretch coast to coast. They got USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. They're already a massive revenue juggernaut at this point. They got revenue pouring in from massive media deals. They've got blue bloods like Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Nebraska. If you still count them as a blue blood, I do. I don't think anybody loses blue blood status, but that's for a different video. But when is enough enough? When will they elect to stay put and not do anything else? Well, unfortunately for college football fans who hate conference expansion, that's not how you build an empire. The Big Ten is trying to build an empire right now. If the Big Ten wants to cement their spot as the best conference, the super conference, the conference of college athletics, of college football, and try to do something alongside the SEC and maybe even break away and form their own super league or anything else, they've got to keep growing. And expansion isn't about survival for the Big Ten like it is for the ACC and Big 12. It's about domination. It's about dominating the sport, dominating college athletics, and making sure people know you cannot survive without the Big Ten, which leaves us not with the question of whether or not the Big Ten will expand, as I think that's an outdated question, but how will they expand? To me, I see two different paths for this. The first path is to keep going nationwide, scooping up schools and untapped media markets, going to places like Florida with Miami, or Georgia, with Georgia Tech, or North Carolina, where that state is growing and popping up and, getting a whole lot more people, maybe going and getting a Texas school or two. That's what they did with the West Coast editions, essentially killing the Pac-12 in the process. Not that they meant to do that. It just kind of happened. I mean, they're back now. They got Boise and Fresno State. They'll be fine. But now eyes are on the ACC, where the grant of rights locks teams in until the 2036, but cracks are showing when Florida State and Clemson obviously want to get out, with them hungry for bigger paydays. If the Big Ten swoops in, they could grab Miami for their, juicy South Florida TV audience, or they could go to Virginia as another school that they could dip into for that DC market if they want to keep being into that. It's all about eyeballs. More viewers means fatter checks for networks like Fox and CBS, NBC, all those things. In fact, not too long ago, Purdue's athletic director, Mike Babinski, I apologize, he did an interview and he nailed it when he said new members have to, quote, pay for themselves plus keep everybody else whole, end quote. That means adding schools that boost the pot and not dilute it. A nationwide push keeps the Big Ten as America's conference from LA to Miami, DC, whatever you want to call it, raking in billions of dollars. Then there's path number two. And this is one that we haven't seen the Big Ten go to in a while, but they have before. They could focus on big brands who have powerhouse programs with national appeal and academic prestige. The Big Ten obviously loves their academics. They love their academic image, AAU membership, research dollars, all that good stuff. Teams at the top of this list would be like, obviously, Notre Dame, with their, kind of eternal tease that they got going on with the Big Ten right now. They've danced with independence forever, but with NIL exploding and, scheduling getting tougher and the playoffs evolving, the Irish might have no choice at some point, since they can't do, as I reported here, they can't do a, kind of pseudo TV deal with the Big Ten. Babinski hinted at it all. He said, we all know who the one is. Beyond the Notre Dame situation could be North Carolina, who screams like a fit with their elite hoops, a lot of investment in football, and everything else they got going on there. Clemson may have been the option back in the day when Dabo Swinney had them as a championship machine, and Florida State might just need to get rid of Mike Norvell, and maybe they're an attractive option after that. But these would be brands more than teams. The Big Ten has spiked ratings with their geography and being in large media markets. So is it time to start spiking ratings with, better brands and better prestige than, some other possible ones they could go to? Not that they have better brands, not that they would get better brands than they have now, but just better brands to help support them. The Big Ten began expansion in 1990 with a big brand in Penn State and then hit another big brand in Nebraska in 2011. And then they started going after the media markets with Maryland and Rutgers in 2014. History says they will prioritize icons that elevate the whole league. Although geography has been its recent focus, it's not always guaranteed that it will be the only focus. But here's the twist. Does the Big Ten even want to expand, right? Do they even want to expand alone? The real drama is with the SEC. These two are the power two pulling away financially from everybody else in college football right now. They're deadlocked on the college football playoff format, the Big Ten pushing for their 24 teams, while the SEC is clinging to 16 teams. The SEC commissioner, Greg Sankey, doesn't want to commit to a long-term plan, and a 24-team field would be a huge step from most fans would, quite frankly, just outright oppose. This isn't just some minor squabbling at this point. It's a power struggle between the two. Who's going to get what they want, the Big Ten or the SEC? And the Big Ten's Tony Petitti and Sankey hold the keys to it all. And they couldn't find room to agree on the ESPN deadline for the playoffs. So now we're back to 12 teams again for this year. But could friction like this fuel a breakup between the two? Would it push the Big Ten to bolt and form its own Super League? Or is it just a blip that keeps marching forward for the Big Ten and SEC future? If you ask the SEC, they'd be fine with breaking off on their own. They've been quite vocal about how everyone essentially, doing what they want while they refuse to follow the rules themselves. Now, I know Sankey got a lot of praise for backing the NCAA rules on Charles Bediako and all that stuff going on, but in reality, he was being the weak his hypocritical self, right? You know what he could have done? He could have made an SEC rule that no pro can come and play in the SEC. He has that power. He could have done that. Instead, he backed the NCAA. They would have had to follow it, because the whole reason Bediako almost won versus the NCAA, he didn't, by the way, if you didn't hear, versus the NCAA, was because they had been kind of lenient with their eligibility rules, and they weren't being consistent. They were being inconsistent, and it was almost how Bediako was able to play. So spare me with the, Sankey was doing the right thing kind of talk and stuff like that. He was being hypocritical again, just as he and the SEC has been for a long time. And it showed with the whole idea of the SEC breaking off with their own and leaving. It's just an empty threat that they'll never actually do. They actually never really could do unless they go out and get a whole bunch of expansion. But in order to do that, I think they'd have to lure teams away from the Big Ten. And with the TV situation, the revenue situation, I just don't see that happening. But could the Big Ten, but the Big Ten could, if they add the right teams, break off on their own. If they become truly nationwide, not only east to west, but also north to south, it could be the Big Ten with a future that is away from the NCAA. Do they want to do that? I wouldn't think so, but we don't know. The Big Ten doesn't talk to the media. If the ACC implodes and say, the 6 teams that the Big Ten once escapes and goes to the Big Ten, they could kind of cherry pick some of them, get North Carolina, Miami, whatever teams they want, and they can keep going for, their own thing, or go after an alliance model where the Big Ten and the SEC merge forces together, breaking from the NCAA to their own rules, their own playoffs, their own everything. And at the end of the day, the Big Ten expansion is strategic. It's not desperate. It's not what they have to do. It's what they want to do to try and dominate more. Nationwide for markets, brands, and prestige, or both. Playoff fights might accelerate a split, creating a Big Ten-led Super League, or they could reconcile, right? Dominating each other. Either way, the Big Ten's calling the shots. I don't think they stay where they are. I think that they're going to get started here soon. But let me know. What do you think? Should the Big Ten expand? Do they need to expand? Do you want to see a Big Ten SEC combined kind of playoff situation? Would love to read and hear your thoughts.